So it's funny because he's Bobby Axelrod's number 2 guy, right?
Okay.
And so he parties so hard in such big circles that he brings in doctors to give him IVs before parties. Yes. Remember that?
Yeah, because they set the business up.
Yeah, they set a business up. Yeah, they set a business up for. They set a business up so that they can. Well, actually, that was Axe's wife and sister.
Oh, that's when he laid her low.
Yeah, when he basically said you didn't come up with a concept, you created. You were, and he didn't know the market. But yeah, so anyway, it's funny because these people that run in these big circles, they do some crazy things. But anyway, I give him style points.
You can't tell we're Billions fans.
Yeah, and we're comparing Wagner to Hank Moody. And I think that if
Hank Moody is my Superman, though. I don't go.
Yeah, so Sam has this thing with Hank Moody,
I can give you guys the room if you need it. I have to leave.
Not a problem. Not a problem. But no, so we're
just throw in the baby oil before you leave.
Exactly.
There you go.
I'm out.
Well,
come on, Joe.
This story may need baby oil because there's a lot going on here. But so there was an article that came up in the Houston Chronicle on the 19th. And it basically it just said MD Anderson ousts 3 scientists over research scandal.
Was it 3 or 5?
No,
3. It was 3. That's right. It was 3.
The article said
that was
3.
Actually on the low end.
Yeah, and that was on the top of the headline. So when you read the story, it rolls up into a. They kind of reported the story backwards. You really got to dig into this a little bit. But they basically said they ousted 3 scientists in connection with concerns that China's trying to steal U.S. scientific research.
Through academia.
So when you first posted this, I looked at it, I'm like, why are we reading this? I was just reading the headline. I saw it, I'm like, this is a softball. Why is Ken? But after I read it, getting into the meat of this thing,
the way it was written, it was almost
just
written,
the headline. The headline was like...
It was almost written to bury the story.
Yes,
you really
exactly.
I felt
Absolutely,
it was.
I think so too.
I think it was written to kind of just let you go, oh, it's just no big deal.
Right.
But what ends up happening is this thing really goes way back in time. And it goes back probably further than 2015, but this particular episode starts in 2015 when the FBI basically sent a memo out to everybody saying, hey, look.
Over 1,000 organizations, I think.
Yeah, it went to 1,000 organizations. We believe that this is an activity that's happening on behalf of China. And
because of the stuff they saw.
The stuff they saw.
Right.
So they saw financial transactions coming in from foreign entities into research scientists' bank accounts that were going unreported.
It could not be explained.
Right. So back, like I said, back as far as 2015, MD Anderson was contacted, but really didn't do much about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't much of a response to it. But there's a benefactor that funds these big grants to it is the largest cancer research institute in the United States of America.
It's a serious hospital. I mean, it's a no-joke hospital. They have a lot of research.
Oh, from all over the world.
I've got a friend that actually worked inside the cancer community developing cancer drugs, and I know the money and stuff that flows through there is huge.
Right.
So, and the collaboration. The collaboration is key because that's what allows them to execute with.
Well, they operate on grants.
Right.
They operate on.
And that's what I was getting at. That's how he got his money.
They operate on grants and public funding and some federal funding. And so the National Institute for Health is that primary benefactor. They actually contributed in 2018, I believe the number was $148 million.
$148 million.
Funneled into one of these programs at MD Anderson. So what ended up happening when this memo went out, they started noticing suspicious activity to some of the research guys that were getting research money.
Yeah.
And so they sent a memo to MD Anderson saying, hey, look.
You got 30 days to comply.
Yeah, you got 30 days to respond to this. And the FBI even backed that 30 days up with them. They basically said there's 5 guys that are research scientists. And they happen to be Asian. They happen to be of Asian descent. Yeah. And they are receiving foreign funds in an account that has not been reported. Okay? And so the NIH has very specific rules on disclosure and transparency.
Where money comes from. They want the trail. They got to have the trail.
They got to have that. Right. And so what ends up happening is MD Anderson kicks off into an investigation that identifies these 5. But there's 23 other guys that are people, that are suspect in this case.
Very widespread.
Yeah, it was very widespread. And the number even went to 1,000 at some point.
Right.
and they actually surrendered emails.
Yeah, it was 1,000 outside of MD.
Yeah.
Now, just to clarify, it wasn't 1,000 inside of MD Anderson. It was 1,000 total, wasn't it?
Internally.
But they gave them access to their servers.
Internally. So what ended up happening is then the same response went to Texas Baylor College of Medicine,
right,
and Texas Tech, Rice University.
Okay, see, I read that wrong. So when I read that, I read that as the 1,000 weren't inside that. But
no, it was. So there's people.
So I read that wrong.
There's regents, there's administrators that are now all being questioned about funding and where this money coming from. And so what ends up happening, it's funny because, like I said, the NIH has very specific rules on funding, and they basically told MD Anderson, if you don't reply with sufficient information that satisfies us, we're cutting your funding off. It's basically cut off. And in the meantime, the FBI is still running their investigation on the backside.
Right.
And it's interesting because when you look at how these things are rolled up, you get a spokesman for MD Anderson that comes out, basically, right? And he's basically saying, look, we're trying to balance this collaboration. He says we need the influence of foreign
dollars, basically,
not just dollars, but the people, the human resources coming over.
Well, they made it sound like they were getting data from them as well.
Yeah,
it's an exchange of ideas,
and they probably do. I mean, I'm sure it's a difficult beam to balance on.
Yeah. But
it's funny. So as they kept digging into these organizations, they were citing a couple specific cases to where I think it was in 2013 or maybe further ahead than that, because I didn't have the number in front of me, where there was an entrepreneur that was accused of sharing stealth, or what they called invisible cloaking technology, with China.
Right.
And he was an entrepreneurial billionaire that was tied to a research grant that came through this same organization. So it's interesting because you're looking at this program, and a name popped up. Excuse me, and it's called the 1,000 Talents program.
1,000 Talents.
And this has been around a while, and so guys, you just jump in at any time because there's a lot going on with the subject matter. Because the 1,000 Talents is basically a funded program by the Chinese Communist Party in China.
Right.
And what they're looking for is people 55 and younger that are in scientific, engineering, entrepreneurial, research positions
to come back home,
that are willing to go out to the major universities all across the world and to become educated and then come back home.
Yeah, it's a deployment of sorts.
Yeah. They pay them $150,000 a year.
It's not a bad paycheck.
And they give them a status. They call it, let me look it up here because I had it written down. They basically gave them a status of National Distinguished Experts.
So you got a title in China to go with it.
We won't kill your family.
Yeah.
So that raises a red flag to the FBI.
Yep.
And they go get a counterintelligence FISA warrant, which I think has underlying tones in this whole thing. And it's all part of this whole argument right now in the news media about trade and the theft of intellectual property, and the tentacles of this are so widespread that this isn't just an MD Anderson or a NIH issue. This is a complete and utter takeover of the intellectual property in the United States by China. And they're trying to get all of this back over to their country. And quite frankly, they're kicking our ass right now. And I think that's why the Trump Justice Department under Sessions kind of kicked this thing up a notch.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see it bubble up, and it comes out here in Houston with MD Anderson. But I guarantee you there are many more investigations going on that you're going to see come up.
Yeah.
They're going to seem ununrelated, but I guarantee you that they're all related. Yeah, absolutely.
Because they addressed this core problem.
They did. And what's funny is since it's been addressed, in August is when NIH really put the screws back down on MD Anderson to comply with their request. In October, the 1,000 Talents organization shut off any ability to find the names.
Yeah, you can't research any
of any of these students or these visa people coming across the United States through these programs. Now, they've been linked to shadow industrial complexes in China. And so what they basically do is they come over here, they get the education, then they go back home. Now they're trying to say that the their propaganda says, well, the program's really not as successful as you think it is.
Yeah.
Well, I completely disagree, because we were talking earlier back during, I think it was the Clinton administration,
Right. So
with the guided missile chips.
right. So if you go all the way back to the Clinton administration, there was donations made to Al Gore's. Clinton was going out of office. Al Gore was going to get the seat for running as the DNC nominee, and he got a bunch of donations in from what ended up being a foreign entity, and it had come to find out there had been information exchanged on ballistic missile technology. We basically took the Chinese ballistic missile program and advanced it 40 years overnight, literally overnight.
Just over technology.
By sending them the data that we had at that point.
Now, was that part of the Hansen? Was that part of the Hansen?
It is. It goes back part of that.
What's his name? Richard Hansen or something like that? That FBI agent that was arrested.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Now, I can, from the...
There was 2 Chinese nationals and him that were in cahoots about that.
When I was still in the Army, I had to spend time at one of our locations in Missouri, and there is the place where I was at is all of their, what we call their scholars, is anybody who's basically a subject matter expert in a particular region of the world or a particular attack that's going on. So, now as technology has grown, cyber attacks have become a very huge thing.
Oh, yeah.
So back in 2009, 2010, when I was at this facility, one of the guys had already authored a book that addressed Chinese hackers. And it was so chock full of information that daily, actually,
I'm sure there's volumes of that.
Well, yeah. So, but
this
this guy's computer was constantly being hacked from outside, or penetration attacks would occur, and so basically weekly, the IT IT for the location would have to come in and basically swap out his computers, because they would figure out little details of how to
well, when you make the
infiltrate.
chips, it's easy. You have an easy way to get in.
But because his book was so broad and covered. I mean, once you identify that their cyber attacks are going on, it doesn't matter what the industry is. It's a tool that they're using to feed into and to get information on whatever it is that they want to know about.
Sure. No, there's no doubt. It's funny because in the article they were outlining some of the security measures they took, like USB protocol security and all this other stuff, which is just appeasing the masses, because most companies, when you put a USB in a computer, it's going to shut it off. It's going to erase the USB and shut off your computer.
Generally sends an IP alert at that point. You know what IP alert's coming.
Yeah, the alert is priority. I want people to know what's going on.
Yeah, because that's been kind of standard for a while. But what I think is funny about this whole thing is how MD Anderson, they're kind of complying on the surface, but they're kind of running internal interference, if you ask me, because I think it implicates more people on the inside.
Well, it goes so far up the food chain. I mean, look how many people are involved with it.
Yeah, because think about the financial ramifications of a shadow laboratory of a cancer drug in China.
Right.
And think of the advantage you would have on being on the inside track financially if you were able to invest in some benefit.
You have the U.S. company.
From an investor standpoint.
From investor side,
You have the U.S. company that's invested billions of dollars into this drug. You have all the investors that have invested into that company. And now you've just cratered that along with everybody's investment. Because now this pill's being produced for 50 cents in China, whereas it's costing the company, by the time the research is done, $10, $12 a pill.
Right.
Well, take a step back, right? Let's look at it from an opposite side. I'm interested in seeing what you guys think about this. There's a guy, a University of Houston professor, who says, hey, look, these are the top foreign talents that countries have been trying to recruit, and they just haven't been doing it very successfully. And now, through this whole process, the FISA warrants, the NIH, everything else that's going on, one, we're being racist, and two, we're pushing out these very talented people out of
we're thinning the talent pool.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. And as a result of that, we're becoming less competitive in the world. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's a bunch of bullshit, because that's why they're coming here.
So
they're coming here because they get things here they can't get over there.
Right.
the racist component was something I saw in the article about, because we're in Houston,
Yeah.
so we have a huge Asian community.
Well, we've been
Huge-
designated as probably one of the biggest melting pots in the South.
Yeah,
So-
that's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
and they have multiple organizations that do a lot of good work around the city. But when you see something like this happen, they're going to be quick to say, "Hey, these are racial biased motivations. You're targeting us." But how I look at it is, when you come out and make a comment like that.
Sure.
Okay, number one is, if you say it in front of the news media, well, that was its intent.
Yeah.
Is I'm going to throw it to the mass source that the masses read. It may not necessarily be the
Right.
truth,
Well,
but still, it's the
Garners
loudest voice in the
attention.
room.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does. So since that comment about the racism started up, because they were confronted with a group, what is it called, the 100 Chinese something group that goes out there and fights. It's like
It was basically care for Chinese.
yeah, it's their Chinese care.
Yeah.
So what's funny, it's since the 18 months since this has all gone down, 10 of these senior researchers or administrators have retired. Okay, resigned or been placed on administrative leave.
They
Which just
disappeared,
adds-
man.
Yeah.
Which adds confusion to the investigation.
Yeah, so some purportedly left on their own accord, but supporters say that a toxic climate and perception of racial profiling
Right.
hastened their departures.
China said, "Come home."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what's funny. 2 of those researchers subsequently took jobs in Chinese institutions.
Absolutely.
Now, when you work with a bunch of guys in a community like that, and you find somebody that you like working with, you're going to recruit your friends back.
Absolutely.
And what's funny is that I get the whole talent pool thing, okay? I understand that conversation. I have a friend that's an engineer in the oil and gas industry, and he's saying that the engineering sector in the United States basically is dying off in lieu of using engineers in India.
Yeah, my friend in the IT says
Yeah.
the same thing.
Globalism.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's
Because
going on in the IT world forever.
He's in an international
Right.
credit company,
Sure.
and so he talks about the a lot of their outsourcing is done through India.
Sure.
So you have a lot of
So they have to
stories there.
send. So they have to send people over there all the time about ethics,
Right.
because it's not that they're nouveau-riche-ly grotesque in their activities in the United States of America. It's just that their culture doesn't interface with people they interact with in the United States.
Right.
So they're always sending guys over on the whole ethics, business ethics, interpersonal ethics.
Don't use pot metal in the girders.
or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so what I think is funny about that whole thing is that, so we're going to sit here and we're pointing fingers at India, we're pointing fingers at China, but we really should be pointing fingers at the captains of the industry,
Yeah.
because they're
That's
the ones
who's boning you.
They're
I mean,
the
in
one
the
that's boning.
end.
They're the one making the money on it.
Yep.
If you follow the money back, it's the old white guy.
It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And they make money off of that. And so they sit there and they pound away at all these social temperance issues. And that's what I call it, social temperance, because that's all it is. So they bring up the whole racist thing. Well, here's the unfortunate truth. All these guys were Asian. Every one of them.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's sad because over there the pressure for their education's a lot different than our.
Oh, yes.
So over here we're making basketball players, we're making football players, we're making musicians, we're making YouTube stars, we're making actors and actresses, and we're making all these perishable jobs that are all based on Western audiovisual culturalism.
Yep.
Okay?
Mike Rowe would dispute that.
Well, who would?
Mike Rowe.
Mike Rowe would? No, Mike Rowe actually is my hero. And he's actually fighting for that ground, right?
Yeah, no, that's what
He's
I'm saying.
actually
It's
fighting for that ground. He's saying, look,
common jobs. This
yeah,
is what
this
we
is
need.
where this is what built our country. This is what kept it strong.
as opposed to actors and
right.
YouTubers.
So for us to sit here and actually try to convince you, an audience, that MD Anderson and all these other organizations are exempt from being passively complicit, I will say,
Yeah.
it'd be the wrong thing to do, because everybody is making money on the backside. I don't give a shit what any of them say. They're all running so they don't get caught.
Oh yeah. I mean, at best they're stupid. At worst, they're
They're involved somehow,
Exactly.
because it takes people looking the other way to let these things happen.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to know. Just do what you're going to do. That, to me, is just as guilty as saying, tell me what you did. Yeah, just tell me what you're doing. And I don't know. So this thing is really rolling up into quite a big thing. I mean, now, like I said, the 1,000 Talents organization is basically telling their people, don't use our name on email.
Yeah.
Don't talk about us.
Yeah, don't talk about us at all.
We're the new Fight Club.
And so I don't know. I just found the story to be really interesting. How low under the radar it went.
Yeah.
Well, I think you raise a great point, though, Ken. That one of the reasons I think that it is low under the radar is because you have all these corporate CEOs who have this dynamic tension between globalism and nationalism, to the extent that I can use that term without being racist. And these guys are trying to make money, and China's a huge global market. India's a huge global market. They
Growing
absolutely.
global.
They see the dollars and cents churning up, and that's where this tension comes from. Is how much do they dive into this pool and try to forward or move forward the whole globalist agenda versus protect the United States.
Well, again, it boils down to...
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna, what it boils down to is, like you said, it is philosophy on tactics. They are willing to take the small steps one at a time to be the global economic power. And I'm speaking of Asia.
Generational for sure.
Yeah. And that's what they are looking at they're looking at the long ball. They are. Whereas American... Look at how the American corporation thinks. They're thinking short term. Give me the money. I want to make mine and get out.
Well,
and that's these guys that are selling out.
That's the Wall Street
mentality. And that's where it comes from. And that's my point. Is they're selling out, and they don't realize in the end, what are you going to have? You're going to have nothing. Your money's going to mean nothing.
Well, yeah, and that goes back to the dark pool discussion we had this morning.
It does.
So what I think is interesting about this whole globalism aspect of this conversation and the talent pools. You can farm smart people anywhere. We have smart people all over.
Hate to break it to you, it's a dime a dozen.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people out there.
It's easy to be smart nowadays.
But when you start bringing people into a lifestyle, say for example from China, the risk they run is they bring people from their country to the Western lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay. There's their defection. That's where things defect for them.
It's an assault on their heritage.
For sure.
No, okay, actually, it gives them some freedoms that they don't have
back home.
Which all of a sudden, wait a minute, you telling me I can think for myself?
So the Chinese openly admit, though, that they like them over here because they get to use internet access that they don't have over there. And it gives them a chance to do things that we won't allow happen in our country. You got to ask, well, why don't they allow that to happen in their country?
Yeah, because they have their own Facebook, all that
Yeah,
shit.
They do. And it's very controlled on the information you can access. Where in the United States, you can touch the world. But what I think is funny is when you do business in China from the food sector, I'll just speak to that sector, because that's really huge. So we'll go back to the McDonald's days. And so everybody wanted to introduce McDonald's to Russia, China. Well, remember when in Paris, France?
Yeah.
That's kind of probably the first leap-off point for McDonald's is probably in the UK. So it leaps off into the UK. Well, Paris is basically a gathering place for everybody around the world. It's a hub for all cultures to come visit Europe through France.
Right.
It's more.
It's very centralized for all the world economic powers to meet at.
So news goes to China and says, hey, this McDonald's things ain't so bad, right? So they start doing a McDonald's over there. So it becomes a logistics problem for fast food companies.
Right.
Okay. So you take a couple companies that are actually manufacturing buns and products for McDonald's in the United States, and they're generally in the South. They're usually in the deep South, and that's where it gets distributed. Sometimes it's in the Northwest, and they just have a distribution in the United States across the country.
Right.
Well, over there it's very expensive, and it's by the time product gets put on a boat, shipped over there, it's probably moldy, bad, or ruined.
Right. So you've had to put all these preservatives. And all
So instead of that, they decide to go over there and they start building plants over there. So I've actually sat in on a couple of these meetings, and what's interesting about these meetings is when you go to China, India's not too far behind it. China has all this land that they just take.
Yeah.
Okay. There's people living on this land. They just take it.
Right.
And they say, okay, here's where you're going to put your factory. But we're not going to build any roads to your factory until you build a power plant. So your first, there's no infrastructure.
Right.
So you have to build your own power plant.
You go in and build all the infrastructure.
In place.
Then they build a road to it. But all the workers that are going to work at your factory live in a village around your factory, and you're going to provide them electricity and water and services.
Right.
Okay? So then you build these facilities. Now, a lot of people think that the facilities overseas are guys running around with bamboo slippers and a bamboo hat. No, it's not. It looks like an operating room. They are state-of-the-art, very clean, very high-tech, very professional.
Well, they were educated here.
Well,
at Baylor and
possibly so.
Yeah.
University of Beijing.
Yeah, so and that, which is actually where a lot of our people go to learn international finance.
That's true.
That's where my former employer's son went to school.
That is true.
And so it's funny because you go over there and you build that infrastructure around your facility, and now you have a state-of-the-art facility that's operating probably more efficient because they don't have unions over there.
Right.
You have the Chinese business cartel, basically, right?
Exactly.
There's three families that run all the manufacturing in that country. 3 families. That's it.
Wow.
3.
That I didn't know.
That's it.
That's interesting.
And they run the entire... It goes... It's a generational thing. You got to remember, that's a dynasty-operated organization over there. Yep. And so it's very, very, very tightly knit over there.
Right.
And so you do business over there. So let's move over to India. Okay? So you want to build a facility in India. India is a little different. Okay, it's almost the same route. You're building your infrastructure. They do have infrastructure there. They do help you with that.
Yeah.
But you're basically you're struggling with a different employee.
It's just a richer Pakistan.
In a way, it is. They're actually. Have you ever seen a picture of downtown like Delhi and stuff like this? Like poles and wires and shit. It's just the most bizarre thing you've ever seen.
Right. That's usually an an IT meme.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So when you see that, so you get to those facilities, pretty much the same you see in China.
Yeah.
Okay. You really do see very clean, sleek, high efficient, automated units.
A lot of money there.
There is.
They've got the money to provide the.
So again, there's no union constraint to the. You see where I'm going here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what ends up happening in the United States, you start looking at guys that are power brokers in these industries, and they know how to make money. So we're going to bog you down with regulation. We're going to bog you down with environmental regulation. We're going to do financial regulation.
Taxes.
Labor regulation. We're going to tax it to give me an excuse to go over there to build this shit. Okay? So now what's happening? Tyson just sold a huge chunk of their protein business to an undisclosed buyer. They have not disclosed who they sold it to. It just happened this week.
Aren't they publicly traded?
They are, but they have not disclosed it.
They must have a certain. I think the SEC puts a certain. They put a time limit.
I shared that information just this morning.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to find the backside of it. Because I have a lot of good inside sources, and I'm not getting anything out of it.
Wow.
So what ends up happening, if you look at the United States, and this is going to speak to Jared Taylor. Jared, we're like spirit buddies on this one here. The chicken industry is held hostage by South America.
Yeah.
Tyson has huge ties.
Oh yeah.
With that chicken production in South America, and now we're looking at dairy has fallen almost completely off the map because China is gearing up dairy industry over there.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening? China used to take all of our refuse and make recyclable materials. They quit doing that. They're trying to clean up their act now. Now they're trying to get the EPA type standards over there. They're not taking our refuse.
Yeah, they're rejecting all recyclables, all scraps, all that stuff. They said no more. Do not send it.
Right. So now they're moving more into the mainstream. They're gearing up to provide food to the rest of the world.
But you're basically the people that are trying to pawn that refuse onto those countries. They're now having to freaking choke on their own shit now.
Yeah, because they're revisiting how you recycle trash now.
Yeah.
And which is sad because I think recycling is the right thing to do. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, no.
But my deal is the country who generates it, or no, the company that generates it. Right now, their game plan is to put it on a ship and send it somewhere else.
It was
now the country
because of this.
But the country is now saying fuck you.
Yeah.
And now they have the company has no plan in place to handle it. So now they're like, okay, literally, you're
somebody wake Joe up here.
No, Joe's research here.
Joe's sitting here riding the wave here because. So I will tell you this, Joe. I was at the lake on Sunday and Monday with a very good friend and very smart guy. He's an engineer and in the petrochemical industry, and we were talking about I was on a venting rant. I was really not in a good mood coming
not
back.
you.
Yeah.
Ranting.
Yeah, I was on a
We don't do
venting
that here.
rant.
Nobody rants
And
here.
I'm trying not to rant today. But we were talking about whose responsibility.
Rant.
Exactly.
Drink.
There you go. So we were talking about the environmental responsibility of companies that manufacture products. Now I know we've gotten way off of the MDA thing here.
Sure.
But you're still there.
But we're still there. Because when you start looking at, let's say, cancer, things that cause cancer, carcinogens,
Yeah.
chemicals in the ground, chemicals in your food, chemicals in all the stuff that you do, you got to look at the bigger picture here. And, you know, and you got to sit there and say, no, all this is done for profitability.
Yeah.
For first and foremost. Not a widespread profitability. It's a very focused,
Very narrow. Yes.
very narrow focus of profitability. When you take a country that had such a robust prior to 2000, and the reason why I referenced 2000 is because that's the expansion and growth of Walmart, Targets, and Kmart's.
Right.
Okay? So when you have that pre-2000 economy where there's 3,500 grocery stores in the United States, independently operated by 500 different regional grocery chains, choked down to less than 24 now, and they're all multi-unit operators. Then you start now focusing all the sources of all the food, all the soft goods, all the pharmaceuticals that come in.
The control becomes a lot easier because you're dealing with fewer people.
Right. So now you can parse off all these manufacturing entities
Right.
to different parts of the world. And so anyway, I got to talking about the environmental responsibility of that, in the sense of if we're making packaging in the United States, okay, that we know is not good for recyclability or good for consumer use, why are we not putting that onus as consumers back on the manufacturer?
Right.
And it's because most people don't care.
Yeah.
They just know that I'm paying 15 cents for something. And what I think is funny is when you go to the store and you buy a quart of fruit and it's like $9, and you buy a quart of processed food and it's $2.
Right.
That should tell you what's going on here. Because I'll tell you, almost everything we eat is full of sugar or starch or chemicals.
Right.
That's the whole thing. Soy is so cheap. Sugar is so cheap. And all these things are not processed in the United States, folks.
Right.
Very few of these things are made here. Most of this shit's made in Europe or Asia. Okay?
They say
Mostly
it's assembled here, but it's assembled from parts outside of the United States.
Exactly. Just like crawfish. There's a place, Robichaud, Louisiana, where they sell crawfish. And it says packaged in Robichaud, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
That shit's coming from Indonesia.
Right. They package it here, and they can say it's made here now because they packaged it here.
So, you know, it's kind of, we're looking at this whole, I know I've spun this thing way the hell off into a different orbit, but we're looking at a whole global economy based upon the principles that were trying to be covered up here at MD Anderson, I think.
Right.
Because you have a foreign entity that's intellectually chiseling away at the infrastructure of the United States.
While they're making themselves stronger.
You have a complicit financial group in the United States that's feeding that.
Right.
Thinking, hey, you know what? We got this. We're making money. We're doing this. We're doing what's best for the economy. At some point in time, when you've gutted all your resources, who do you bow to?
And this here,
China.
Yeah.
this is all just one industry.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and it's funny. So cancer research, it's arguable that cancer can be eradicated by simply changing the direction of the food chain.
Right.
The food chain. If you eliminate environmental hazards to the people, I mean, when you stop and think about where all these things come from, and you start finding out, oh, we've been eating this for 10 years and it's got what? Soy is the biggest farce right now. For so many years, they tell you soy is the best protein for you. Now, you find out it's so full of glyphosate from Monsanto that, you know, Monsanto's on the ropes now because they're actually taking some heat and they're just trying to reinvent their product lines.
Don't drink the Roundup.
Yeah, well, and you can't escape. And you can't escape it. If you feel like you've drank Roundup, we'll get you Joe's information.
Yeah,
and
Joe can hook you up.
Joe will hook you up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just
Been
like
some
I said,
big verdicts on those cases.
There has been, yeah. So for me, it's like I said, I can sit here and just go round and round and round. But
Well,
at the
I
end
think
of the
you
day,
do make a good point, though, of how there is a complicit effort within the United States, I think funded in part by these foreign entities,
yes,
to restrict our ability to manufacture here because they want to move those
Over there.
operations over there,
Yeah.
for the sole purpose of it's a choke point.
Sure.
If it's
Control.
in their
It comes
country,
down to control.
if it's in their country,
Yes.
all of a sudden, hey, we control half of the protein that goes to the United States.
Yeah,
Don't mess with us.
that's exactly right.
And I think that is the underlying problem, message, or concern that this MD Anderson issue raises, which is this is bigger than just MD Anderson. This is bigger than just
Sure.
NIH. This is, are we fighting for our future and the control of our ability to manufacture steel, to manufacture medicines, to manufacture a sufficient amount of protein to feed our population? And we seem to be under the progressive and globalist narrative to be outsourcing that to everybody else.
So
That's
if you
just
want to
my-
know the price of tea in China, ask the FBI.
Yeah.
No doubt, for sure.